Hi everyone. We're going to spend some time today talking about one literary critic's view of the Epic of Gilgamesh. The source for this presentation is Thorkild Jacobsen, and full bibliographic information appears on the master works cited sheet for the course. First of all, according to literary critic Thorkild Jacobsen, Gilgamesh is believed to have been an actual historical figure. In fact, he's believed to have been the king of the city of Uruk right around 2600 BC. Jacobsen tells us that we know that stories about him were told as early as 2100 BC, and that those stories had most likely been passed down from generation to generation from the time that Gilgamesh actually ruled. The epic was finally written down in cuneiform on clay tablets, and the epic that we have before us is what's been found by archaeologists so far. But the manuscript has been found in chunks, and we know that parts of it have not yet been uncovered by archaeologists. Jacobsen says, though, that the earliest version of the epic that we have in writing dates from about 1600 BC. It's the oldest literary work that has been discovered so far by archaeologists. Oh yeah, there are older writings, but they're largely records of financial transactions, marriages, and other types of public records like that. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest written story that has yet been uncovered, and that makes it significant to study. Jacobsen says that the central purpose of the narrative is the exploration of Gilgamesh's two contrasting attitudes toward death. As we shall discuss, these two very different attitudes toward death affect Gilgamesh's definition of immortality, and he undertakes two quests to find immortality, each of them based on a different perception of what that term means. Now, according to Jacobsen, Gilgamesh's attitudes toward death and immortality at the beginning of the epic reflect the heroic values of his time. First of all, the heroic code maintained that death itself was not the enemy because it's inevitable. And Jacobsen says that since physical death was inevitable, the heroic code defined immortality as lasting fame that extended far beyond physical death. Furthermore, Jacobsen says that the heroic code maintained that this immortality could be achieved by dying a glorious death in a battle against a worthy opponent. By this definition, the body dies, but the name lives on and brings honor. Now, according to Jacobsen, Gilgamesh is operating under these definitions of death and immortality when he battles in Kindu and gains a lasting friend. The pair then carries these attitudes into their battle against Humbaba. And we notice in reading the epic that it isn't required that heroes enter these battles entirely without fear. Gilgamesh and Enkidu experience fears and doubts as they journey to the battle site. But with each other's help, they carry on in spite of their fears and doubts. The epic appears to tell us that heroes are not expected to be completely without fear, which, of course, is a natural human response. Instead, heroism results from overcoming fear to take necessary action. So, Gilgamesh and Enkidu defeat Humbaba, and after doing so, they return to Uruk and are met with jubilation and praise from the people of the city, according to Jacobsen. After all, they defeated an enemy that the people had believed could not be conquered even by a full army. But it's not just the people of Uruk who are impressed by Gilgamesh's accomplishment. The goddess Ishtar is so impressed that she asks Gilgamesh to marry her. Now, the existence of Gilgamesh himself is proof that marriage and sex between gods and humans was part of the beliefs of the culture, because after all, Gilgamesh is, as we are frequently reminded, 2/3 god and 1/3 human. Of course, the Mesopotamians didn't know anything about genetics because genetics can't be divided by thirds. But we take it for what it is. So Gilgamesh, as part god and part human, would be a good mate for Ishtar. But Gilgamesh is so empowered by his defeat of Humbaba and his popularity in Uruk that he not only refuses to marry the goddess, but he does so in a really insulting manner. Instead of simply saying that he is not prepared to be married at that time, or that he doesn't feel worthy to marry a goddess, he turns down Ishtar's proposal by insulting her past relationships, as well as insulting her personally. Now, gods and goddesses do not take insults from human beings lightly. So, seeking revenge, Ishtar sends the bull of heaven to battle and conquer Gilgamesh and Enkidu. But Ishtar's plans are defeated when Gilgamesh and Enkidu fight and kill the bull of heaven, and they do this in full view of all the residents of Uruk. So killing a creature sent by a goddess is seen as a truly astounding feat, and so according to Jacobson, Gilgamesh is at the height of his fame at this point. But unfortunately, Gilgamesh's glory is short-lived. According to Jacobson, in ruthlessly asserting themselves against the gods by killing Humbaba and the bull of heaven, and then by insulting Ishtar, they have invited the gods' wrath. And the punishment is, unfortunately, Enkidu's death after days of painful suffering. Now, when Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh is forced to face the stark reality of death for the first time, according to Jacobson. While the heroic attitude of accepting death and seeking immortality through lasting fame was fine with Gilgamesh when death was an abstract concept, he rejects it when he's faced with the concrete reality of death. At that point, according to Jacobson, Gilgamesh realizes not only that he has lost the only true companion he has ever had, but also that he himself will eventually face death. Death in the concrete, not in the abstract. Now, when he realizes the concrete reality of death that awaits him, all of his previous values collapse. A glorious death fighting a worthy foe, an enduring name, and immortal fame mean absolutely nothing to him anymore. Gilgamesh is now gripped by an inconquerable, consuming terror of death, according to Jacobson. And so he adopts a new value system, and he becomes obsessed with avoiding death and staying alive in a physical sense forever. Now, Gilgamesh's change in his attitude toward death and his definition of immortality sets him off on a new quest, according to Jacobson. Because he now views immortality as escaping physical death, he sets out to search for his ancestor Utnapishtim, who was renowned for both preventing the destruction of all life on Earth during the Great Flood and for being immortal. Now, Gilgamesh undertakes a long and arduous quest for Utnapishtim because he believes that his ancestor could tell him how that he, too, can become immortal. Now, Gilgamesh is helped in his journey by a few people that he encounters. The Scorpion Man and his wife, for example, give some assistance. Saduri, the winemaker, definitely assists him, if only by advising him to give up his quest for immortality, go home, take a wife, and have a family. But Jacobson points out that just as Gilgamesh's quest for immortality, as it was defined by the heroic code, led him to one success after another, his quest for physical immortality leads him to successive failures. And of course, Gilgamesh's ultimate failure occurs when he meets Utnapishtim and learns that his ancestor's immortality is the result of the unique situation of the flood. it's not something that Gilgamesh can duplicate, according to Jacobson. And to prove his point that it's impossible to hope for the vigor and strength to overcome death, Utnapishtim challenges Gilgamesh to a contest that requires him to stay awake for 7 days. And of course, Gilgamesh immediately falls asleep and sleeps for 7 days instead. But as Jacobson points out, just when it seems that Gilgamesh has reached total, irreversible failure in his quest for physical immortality, he's offered a new hope. Utnapishtim's wife convinces her husband to tell Gilgamesh about the plant that returns an old man to childhood so that he can begin his life again. Now, true, the plant doesn't guarantee immortality, because there are many ways to die other than just old age. But what it does is it negates the old age factor that inevitably leads to death, even if other modes of fatality are avoided. So satisfied that the plant offers him the closest thing for immortality that he can hope for, Gilgamesh begins his journey home. Along the way, though, he is tempted by the waters of a refreshing pool, and he carelessly leaves the plant on the shore, as Jacobson points out. And then, while Gilgamesh is swimming, a serpent comes along and seizes the plant, rendering Gilgamesh's quest for physical immortality totally worthless. Now, Jacobson maintains that Gilgamesh's downfall and loss in both quests for immortality result from his defying the gods. In his first quest for immortal fame as a warrior, his needless killing of the god Enlil's servant Humbaba and his scornful defiance of Ishtar brought retribution through Enkidu's death. But Jacobson says that Gilgamesh's second quest for immortality is even more deeply defiant of the gods because it is an attempt to defy the very condition of being human, finite, and mortal. It is, as Jacobson says, an attempt to defy human nature itself. But Jacobson states that in the end, it is Gilgamesh's human nature that ultimately saves him. The carelessness that leads Gilgamesh to leave the plant on shore to be stolen by the serpent is a weakness that is a part of human nature and totally lacks heroic stature, Jacobson maintains. But ultimately, this loss brings Gilgamesh to his senses. At first he sees himself as pitiful and weeps at his loss of the plant. But then he is able to smile at himself. And Jacobson states that Gilgamesh's smile at the irony of how his superhuman efforts led to almost comic results is a sign of a saving sense of humor, another aspect of human nature. So, at last, Gilgamesh is able to accept the reality of death and adopt a third set of values, Jacobson says. The immortality that Gilgamesh seeks after completing these two quests is the relative immortality of lasting achievement, not just fame, but actually achieving something of lasting value. And this definition of immortality leads Gilgamesh to construct the Walls of Uruk, an achievement that the narrator praises him for at the beginning of the epic. Now, Jacobson proposes that the movement in the Epic of Gilgamesh is the movement from heroic idealism to everyday realism. And Jacobson says that this is a positive movement because the heroic idealism results in needless battles, such as the killing of Humbaba, because it defines immortality in a way that depends on dying in battle. Everyday realism, on the other hand, results in the protection from battles that's offered by the Walls of Uruk, because everyday realism defines mortality as lasting achievement, Jacobson says. Now, Jacobson says that this movement from idealism to realism is also the movement from childhood to adulthood. Throughout the epic, Gilgamesh appears as a mere boy in terms of his attitudes, Jacobson says. He holds on to the status and refuses to grow up by rejecting marriage and parenthood in favor of seeking adventure with Enkidu, who is like a boyhood friend, Jacobson tells us. Now, when Enkidu's death offers a chance to mature by seeking a wife, Gilgamesh instead flees backward toward the security of childhood by seeking out an ancestor that Gilgamesh believes can grant him physical immortality, Jacobson states. He even takes possession of a plant that could literally allow him to be a child again and again and again through all eternity. But it is losing the plant, losing the illusion that he can return to childhood, that forces Gilgamesh to accept the reality that he must grow up, Jacobson states, pointing out that when Gilgamesh can smile ruefully at his own folly and accept the reality of life and death, he has reached maturity. Ultimately, Jacobson concludes, Gilgamesh is a story about growing up. Okay, that's all I have to go over with you from Dr. Jacobson. I hope this presentation helped you understand and appreciate some of the aspects of Gilgamesh a little bit more. Of course, if you have any questions or need any clarification, all you have to do is drop me an email through Canvas. I always love hearing from my students, and I'll be happy to get back to you as soon as I can. We'll talk again soon, and in the meantime, try to enjoy life.